Imagine for a moment that you are at the end of your life, sitting in a bed at the age of 100, waiting to fall asleep for the last time. In this moment, how important is a 10-year period of your life? Most would say that it is very significant. In 10 years, life can change drastically for a person in both good and bad ways. 10 years can make a person seem completely different by the end, and as such, it is considered impactful. Now say that you consider a year of your life, a mere 100th of your existence on this planet. It is here that, especially weighed in contrast to the 10 years, that 1 year is considered insignificant. This way of thinking about time is perfectly logical. It's a given that in such a long lifespan, a period of that little time could seem unimportant. But our perception of time itself is anything but logical. In fact, time, at least how we perceive it, is but a human-made illusion. The idea of the phrase, time is a construct. It is in this phrase that many people have found a great sense of hopelessness. The idea that a concept that is so integral to how humans live their lives being absolutely meaningless in the grand scheme of things makes life itself feel almost meaningless. But alternatively, the fact that time isn't a concrete rule but rather a concept to be perceived can allow for the molding of said concept. It is in this way that the undefined nature of man's perception of time is beautiful. This is the message that Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, seeks to convey. Frieren, Beyond Journey's End is a manga series that recently received an anime adaptation. While on the surface it is a fairly standard fantasy anime, this setting and genre both serve to tell a story that is unmistakably human. It's a story about time and how its significance is molded by the mind. Rather than going the standard route of showing heroes on their way to defeat a big bad, this show takes place after that adventure has long ended. The world is now in a state of peace due to the actions of the main character Frieren and her group of adventurers. Being an elf, however, Frieren doesn't think much of her time spent adventuring. For her, the 10 years that were spent defeating the Demon King are insignificant, as she has lived for well over 1,000 years by this point. That's how she sees it, at least. This is displayed well in the first episode, where we see the hero celebrating after defeating the Demon King. Here, when being asked what she wishes to do from here, Frieren quite coldly explains that to her, the adventure didn't mean that much, being little more than a detour. As such, she simply plans to return to her life of wandering the world looking for spells. She fails to understand how such a short amount of time can have any value. But this isn't the case for her fellow adventurers. Being humans, their lifespans are considerably shorter. As such, this 10-year adventure serves as the defining experience of their lives. But it goes beyond that. While it is true that the physical restraints of their lifespans places greater value on such a length of time, it's the ability to view time from an emotional perspective that truly makes the period so valuable for them. They have chosen to allow that time to impact them. Now, it is here that I would like to note that Frieren is not written to be without emotion. Rather, she finds herself viewing the world in a way that seems logical to her. She is a prime example of the idea that we talked about at the start of this video, about a view of time from a purely logical perspective. It is this logic, however, that is challenged throughout the show. We first see Frieren questioning her beliefs later in the first episode. Frieren finds herself visiting the leader of the group, Himmel, years after leaving said group. Himmel is in the last years of his life, having aged significantly since his adventuring days. He has since found himself living a relatively simple life, fondly reflecting on his time adventuring. Frieren finds herself shocked at how much has changed, namely Himmel's age. This is where she first begins to grasp the value of their time together. But the first major blow to Frieren's belief comes in the form of Himmel's death. While Frieren is visiting, Himmel peacefully passes away in his sleep one night. Suddenly, those 10 years gain a whole new meaning for Frieren. She realizes that those years are, and forever will be, the only years which she spent with Himmel. It's at this moment that the physical length of time has no bearing, and she in fact finds herself feeling that maybe 10 years wasn't enough. In this moment, every minute of those 10 years becomes invaluable to her. Every single experience and exchange of words, one of a kind in nature. There will never ever be another chance to relive those moments. And this is where the show first displays the immense beauty of the ambiguous nature of one's perception of time. We watch in this moment as time itself takes a new form. It twists and contorts with the flow of Frieren's emotions. The physical restraints of 10 years loses all bearing, and Frieren is left to decide on her own what the importance of that period is. She is filled with a deep sense of despair, but also a great sense of joy that such a moment in time could ever have existed. She only wishes that she could have viewed time from that emotional place before the people around her were gone. This serves as a lesson to not cheat oneself when it comes to time. Time is cold in its physical restraints. Once a time is past, it is past forever. But memory serves as one of the most important parts of our view of time. By allowing any amount of time to truly impact you, by viewing time from a sense of how it felt to you, you can preserve that time forever in your mind. The physical numbers of it all mean nothing. Only the value that you yourself assign to that period does. It is in this practice that you will have made the most of your time. Episode 2 gives us a more direct example of the flaws in Frieren's logic. Shortly after Himmel's death, Frieren decides to visit the other members of her former party. She meets up with Heider, a human priest who is also nearing the end of his life. He had spent the latter half of his life raising a young orphan by the name of Fern. His final wish to Frieren is that she take care of Fern and teach her magic. It's from this moment onward that Frieren's life changes drastically. Frieren is used to spending years at a time slowly working away at whatever happens to catch her attention. She has no regrets spending years on the most mundane of things because, once again, years are nothing to her. But it's when she becomes responsible for another person that this isn't possible. Fern is a human. She doesn't have infinite time to waste. It's this relationship that fully exposes the selfish nature of living by the pure logic of time. Living by the supposed rules does nothing to consider how others view time. To claim that any amount of time is unimportant is to disregard all of the factors present at that time. It's to forget the people, the sights, the feelings. It's to reject all of those factors in the ultimate act of abandonment. It's to disregard other people's perception of that time by saying that, by logic's standards, that time should never have any significance. It is to say that no matter how they perceived that time and no matter how meaningful it was for the people around her, that time was ultimately meaningless by her logic. Further, it is not a constructive way to view time. To consider any amount of time to be insignificant is to truly be closed-minded. However brief a time was, you can consider the finer details. How did you feel? How did the people around you feel? All of it comes together to paint a picture that will never be painted again. This was true with Frieren's adventuring party. However, she never stopped to consider what time meant for the people around her, and rather made the choice to not understand, but instead to mark said period as unimportant. As such, she finds herself knowing very little about those people, and lacks the knowledge of what made that period of time so special for them. She has allowed logic to shape her perception of time, and as such, it is cold and calculated with no regard for emotion. For this, she is a little less happy than she could be. She refuses to let herself be affected by those memories. She rejects that very idea that that little time could be life-changing. Now, Frieren is presented with a chance to experience life at a pace of her choice, to savor the time she has with the people around her, and to finally get to know those people. To make periods of time that should be irrelevant feel important, Fern gives Frieren a reason to perceive time illogically. Frieren obliges. It is here at the point where Frieren seemingly begins to understand the value of time that she is faced with the exact opposite belief. A being with the same beliefs that she used to hold brought to their natural extreme. These beings are demons. Demons are long-living creatures much like elves, but in contrast, they completely lack any emotion. Their belief is that time is simply important for what you gain out of it. The importance of a period of time in the eyes of a demon is the tangible gains that were made. When they speak about time, it is most often in the context of how much stronger they are now than before. It's the logical view of time taken to its absolute limit, where it is simply a tool in the pursuit of more power. Rather than a period of 10 years not mattering, no amount of time truly matters. It is simply the results that are deemed important. It displays a disgusting disregard for the infinite value of time. It's a mindset that wishes not to give value to time itself, but to gain value from it. Frieren despises them. When she confronts a demon with whom she had fought previously during her adventure, Himmel's name is brought up. When questioned why Frieren's fighting style had changed, Frieren recalls a time when she was scolded by Himmel for being too destructive, this affecting her method of attacking in the future. The demon coldly asks, "Wait, isn't he dead?" Frieren says yes. The demon replies, "Isn't that all the more reason not to do that?" Frieren doesn't falter. She has been molded by her perception of time. Unknowingly, she has been changed by them. It is at this point that she has gained more value from time than a demon ever could. She has become the master of her own time, and has allowed her past to shape her, however short those periods of time may be. I have had thoughts about our perception of time for a long time now. It's in the in-between moments that I have found myself realizing that there is an immense value in every moment. No amount of arbitrary rules can take this away from a person. Time is, as they say, what you make of it. Having that control over such an influential facet of life is beautiful, if not a little bit intimidating. It is your responsibility alone to get the most value out of time, to savor the moments that have led up to your current self, to let those moments affect you. However, all too often, we find ourselves downplaying the significance of those moments that, to us, logically, should not matter. People would rather point at a few select key moments of their lives and use those to explain why they are who they are. But this isn't the case. To believe that your life can be boiled down to a few key moments is not only foolish, but sad. It is to say that the living you did in those other moments wasn't a form of living that was worth any mention. It makes your life as a whole look more empty in retrospect, when this is anything but the truth. People are not made up of key moments. People are made up of every single moment that they have ever experienced. The only difference between people is whether they choose to embrace this idea or choose to live by the rigid logic of time. Let me take you back to the start of this video, where we judged the impact of 1 year out of 100 years. If you have understood the lesson of this video, that year is now bursting with opportunity. That year can be just as important as 10 years. You simply have to perceive it to be.